Welcome everyone, it's Gratian Guy, Rock the Gratian as always. As I mentioned in my previous video, I kind of want to talk about movies a little bit more than I normally do. And these two movies are movies that I do want to kind of discuss a little bit. So Train to Busan, so they're both zombie movies. They're both made by South Korean director Hwang Sung-ho, which I probably mispronounced, but they are both interesting movies. Train to Busan, probably one of my top 5 favorite zombie movies behind Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. And I did like World War Z for certain parts of it, 28 Days Later, and there were other movies that I did really enjoy. And if you hear any scratching, those aren't zombies, those are my cat, because I closed the door because she was being a bit of a jerk. But moving on, so Train to Busan is a great movie. It's a great, exhilarating ride. Basically, starts out with just the zombie virus starting to basically take over South Korea, and then them fleeing to Busan because it's supposedly the one area of safety. Has a lot of allegories to the Korean War. I don't know if it was intentional by the team, but it does kind of harken back to when the South Korean and Allied force went all the way north into North Korea during the war, got to the Chinese border, and then were immediately repelled by a significantly overwhelming force of Chinese that originally the generals didn't think the Chinese were going to, one, bother, and two, they didn't, it could have been a bit of disrespect, but they did not plan for a massive Chinese counterattack. So the Chinese counterattack pushed the South Korean and Allied forces basically to Busan. And so kind of a little allegory in Train to Busan, but great movie. If you were to give this a 10 out of 10, though, you would probably give Peninsula like a 5.5 to 6 out of 10. But it is not a bad movie. It is an okay movie. It covers different topics and has slightly different points. So while this is a kind of a survival, fast pace, we just got to get away from the zombies and got to get to somewhere of safety. This is a heist movie, very similar to Army of the Dead, which came out recently on Netflix within the last year or so. And that one was kind of very similar. And where that one, the zombies are contained within Las Vegas. This one, they're contained on the South Korean peninsula. Because in the story, I don't know if they mentioned it in Train to Busan. I think they didn't really, they may have off-covered and mentioned it. But in Peninsula, they talk about how the North Koreans have basically shut down the whole border and keeping the zombies from coming north. Now, you think, well, how is that possible? If you've ever been to Korea, the terrain between the border and the country at large is very unforgiving. So it is quite possible to use natural mountainous terrain and selective barriers at bridges and roads to keep zombies from going north. So it's quite possible. Not to mention the demilitarized zone could have been increased with even more landmines and things like that. So it's very possible for the North Koreans to keep the zombies from coming north. So there's that. And but so this movie starts with about 30 to 40 minutes of kind of flashback to this era of 4 years ago from the setting of the movie to just trying to escape, just trying to get out of South Korea with all the zombies, getting onto boats, and then basically some of the boats having infected on them, which basically Japan goes, nope, we don't want them. China doesn't want them. A lot of nations don't want the refugees, and they end up in Hong Kong. Why Hong Kong? I don't really know. I guess Taiwan said no, and yes, I'm aware that there are people that don't like when Taiwan is brought up, but that's what I refer to that little island off the coast of China. I know there's other names for it, but I refer to it as Taiwan. But anyways, let's move on. So they end up in Hong Kong, which is an interesting place, especially if you're trying to transplant a surviving population from the mainland. But either way, they end in Hong Kong. They're not treated very well. One, because they're not native to Hong Kong, so they're not treated very well. Not because they're not like contributing to our society. Like Hong Kong is pretty cosmopolitan. Let's not get into that. But anyways, so they end up in Hong Kong, and they end up, but they do meet up with some people that are going to fund them to go back into South Korea to recover some money. So there's a bunch of US dollars in a truck that a bunch of other robbers went to go get because they were like, well, nobody's going to stop. So there is a defensive perimeter of boats and aircraft that are scanning there's like an exclusion zone, but apparently the smugglers pay their way into the zone and get onto the land, and then they try to steal all the money that people have kind of abandoned. The main character, two of the main characters kind of know each other, and they go in and they actually find other surviving people that are there in the peninsula, and it's a pretty interesting like 2-hour movie. I got a little bit bored during some of the sequences, but the action sequences and the chase sequences I think are pretty fun. And the shooting's pretty good. I think the shooting gunplay is pretty good. One thing that I don't like though is that some of the survivors seem to have are kind of portrayed as being very dumb, which seems odd to me. If you learn how to survive in a zombie apocalypse, you would be pretty smart-witted about yourself, but they kind of portray them a little bit dumb. They do eventually kind of figure out what's going on, but you should be more suspicious. And I think it was probably along the lines of they wanted to move the plot forward in a very specific way, in a sort of direction they were going. And so they didn't want the characters to kind of pick up a little bit too much. But I mean, maybe it's because as an audience, you know a little more. But anyways, this movie ends with a rescue, and the peninsula is still swarming with zombies. This does have a satisfying ending, but what I think would be more satisfying is a third movie. Let's slot in a third movie. Now, what would I do for a third movie? I would do basically kind of what the Korean War, because this was that point in the Korean War, Train to Busan was that point in the Korean War where everything was going terrible. You could sort of see this as kind of like the holding out in Busan kind of thing, but not really. This is kind of a separate little story where imagine if people went into behind enemy lines to capture some money or whatever, or to get some intelligence or some gold, kind of that what Peninsula would be. I would do a movie where it's basically some reason, some catalyst for going in and completely wiping all the zombies out. A full united force going in and a straight war on man versus zombie, like mass war. Because I think that would be kind of cool to see. It doesn't have to be live action. It could be an animated film. There is, by the same director, there is an animated film called Seoul Station that I recommend. Animation style is a little jarring if you're not used to that kind of animation style. But overall, Seoul Station is a really good show. It's a really good movie. But I think a third movie to this would be basically the American army or the American military, the remaining South Korean surviving military, and then like other allied nations from around. Because I think at that point you could say that if you could coordinate with North Korea and China, you could basically say, look, we're going to go in and we're going to take back the country and we're going to kill every single zombie around. You can either just stay out of the way or you can help us. And so you could probably get some sort of agreement to just, hey, we have a temporary alliance of taking out all the zombies. You go in there and like you fight all the zombies. We already know that there are pockets of surviving humans left in the peninsula because of this movie. So it would be interesting because in World War Z, in the book, they do talk about how there are surviving humans that just do not want to let go of their new warmongering power, their new warlord powers. And so it'd be interesting to have the allied military fight back and go through bringing weapons and armor and vehicles designed specifically to kill off zombies. So bulldozers, heavy trucks, things that are up armored, tanks, but not tanks with main cannons because you wouldn't need a main cannon. You wouldn't need a heavy main cannon against zombies, but you would want like dual chain guns or some sort of high volume fire, but like low explosion. Because in World War Z, they talk about how they got really good at just using very simple 223 rifles that fire volley fire and that are very focused shots at like target, like head, neck, target shots. And so it'd be really interesting to see basically a whole movie about being like, all right, so we learned how to fight zombies and we brought zombie specific killing gear and then we just basically go through and the whole movie should basically just be them interacting with killing zombies and clearing zones and sectors and you could have like an antagonist to where like one or two warlords don't want to give up their power, but a couple warlords do, are like, oh man, we're way on board with, you know, just getting back to freaking normal. And so maybe some of the factions ally with the army coming in, the military coming in and saving the day. And then you got fighter jets overhead. You got ships bombarding the coastline. You got Marines of both sides. I think that would be a cool kind of like concept of just, you know, Apache helicopter and gunships and just like, and like drones just mowing down zombies. Like imagine if you saw a battle space where like an American F-18 Super Hornet and like a Chinese fighter jet. I'm not super familiar with all the different names. Like or like a Russian Su-27. Is it 27? Either way, like a Russian fighter jet just bombing the crap out of zombies. I think that'd be pretty freaking awesome. Like even if it's just an anime movie, I think it'd be pretty cool. And then the way I would end the movie is not with a cheesy romance or any love sequence or anything. It would just basically being like, all right, mission accomplished. And if you ever watch the movie The Postman, there's the ending sequence for The Postman is basically being like, and we sort of kind of figured it all out and like rebuilt everything. We've done post-apocalyptic stories a lot. Recently, there have been a lot of post-apocalyptic stories. And I mean, like I like Fallout and like surviving a post-apocalypse, but what we haven't seen is a bad event happens and rebuild. We've seen a lot of the event starting and occurring or surviving in the apocalyptic event, but we have not seen it. We rebuilt, and not rebuilt in like a primitive way of like the time machine where we rebuilt like embracing nature or whatever. I'm talking about rebuild and like, and what was that movie? Dredd and Judge Dredd. That's basically surviving a dystopian apocalypse and kind of just holding on. I want to survive the apocalypse and then push forward, recover tainted land, and exceed. I want to excel. I want a movie where, yeah, the zombies, they bust it out. There's millions of them. It's gonna be a slog. But you know what? I'm going to put 200,000 ground troops, vehicles, tanks, 300,000. I'm going to put hundreds, if not thousands of bombers, fighters. I'm going to use I'm going to use cluster bombs. I'm going to develop munitions specifically designed to kill zombies. I'm going to develop all this cool tech designed specifically to kill zombies. And I'm going to unleash that on this horde. And I'm going to try to minimize collateral damage as much as possible. But I'm also going to know that, look, if we have to eradicate the virus as much as we can. If we can save buildings and infrastructure, we will. But if it's going to cost lives and potentially make more infected, we're just going to have to destroy the building. Go in, clear out all the zombies, and then see it from different perspectives. And you can even tell it as kind of like a survivor story. Because World War Z, the book, is kind of like a series of interviews from survivors of the zombie war. I think that'd be cool if you could kind of do an intermix where they do have interviews of people like a South Korean fighter pilot who is flying either an American aircraft or one of the surviving South Korean aircrafts. Because you got to imagine some of them didn't break out. And basically talking about, you know, how much they've been waiting to go back in, and they finally got the clearance to go back in, and they basically just, you know, yes, it was traumatizing. You're going to have a lot of people talking about the PTSD of having to mow down zombie children. Like, it's going to be a thing. And like maybe they like, I wouldn't, because they do show in certain zombie shows, they do show zombie children, but they don't really show them like taking them out, because like, you know, killing zombie kids is not really, it's still killing kids even though they're zombie kids. But I think like mentioning, just having like some guy being like, yeah, you know, I did it. I didn't want to, but I did it. And there's that scene in Chernobyl where they have to go through and kill dogs and cats. And that is a terrifying scene in Chernobyl in the series. And it's just something that had to be done. And I think it'd be an interesting movie or series, like even a 3-episode miniseries. So that's where I'd want to see this go next. So yeah, let me know if you like my little like kind of my spin, my take on reviewing movies. And if you were to make a third movie if you haven't seen the Peninsula, it's a recommended rental. I don't know if I'd buy it, especially at the cost I bought this one for, but I would definitely rent it for like $5 or whatever, and then I would just give it a watch. Especially if you like this one. It is the CGI in it is a bit bad, but I think just kind of setting as a world building, kind of filling in the gaps with this. This isn't really. This has gaps, but this is set 4 years later, so it kind of does talk about it a little bit. I think if you have seen this one, what would you do with the third movie? And you could have an antagonistic where like the North Koreans don't want the South Koreans to like retake their country back, so the North Koreans like kind of try to antagonize zombie hordes to try to take on the invading army. You could kind of do something like that, or you can have it to where the North Koreans ally with the surviving South Koreans, and like they do reunite the peninsula as like a big feel good at the end. So that would be interesting. I don't want it to be a bad or a twist ending. I really want it to be like a happy, all the zombies are dead ending and we rebuilt. So that's kind of where I'm going. But yeah, let me know how you feel. And if you are looking for like a science fiction space opera, feel free to pick up my book. The link is in the description below, and it is I enjoyed writing it. Had a lot of fun, and this is part 1. So the more people give me feedback and sales, the more motivated we'll be to do part 2. I recently lowered the price a bit to $2.99 for ebook, but it's still I think $14.99 for paperback. But the ebook is pretty good. Anyways, have a good one, and see you around. Goodbye.